Hey, umbrella guy. Get that cart out of the way. You're contaminating the operational zone. The shout ripped through the sterile tension of the command center's perimeter. It came from Agent Hollis, the designated lead for the CIA Special Operations Division, his voice tight with the barely contained stress of a mission going disastrously wrong. He jabbed a gloved finger at Elias, a man in his late 60s, who was slowly pushing his dented metal food cart, the kind that sold coffee and warm pastries, along the high chain-link fence. Elias paused, his faded denim jacket pulled tight against the pre-dawn chill. He wore a simple, knitted cap pulled low over his forehead, and his thick, calloused fingers gripped the cart's handle. He offered a small, apologetic wave and dragged the heavy cart a few feet back into the shadows of the warehouse wall, trying to make himself less visible, less of a nuisance. He knew his presence was an anomaly, a breach in the high-security field operation, but this was his route, and routine was his shield. The young CIA field agents, geared up in silent, dark tactical apparel, Kevlar, and encrypted comms, barely glanced at him. To them, Elias was just background noise, a slow-moving obstacle, a civilian who sold cheap coffee, the absolute antithesis of their world of high-stakes, geopolitical warfare. They didn't know that the eyes watching the abandoned industrial park, the eyes they so casually dismissed, had once charted smuggling routes through the dangerous, unmapped river deltas of West Africa, waiting weeks for a single crucial moment to deliver life-saving intelligence. If you believe that true wisdom is often found outside the corridors of power, and that the greatest assets are sometimes the ones you least expect, tap the like button right now and let's get into the story. The classified mission to retrieve the high-value foreign national, a journalist named Kale, was imploding. The objective was to infiltrate the sprawling, abandoned steel complex where Kale was held captive. The complex, a massive, rusted skeleton of industry, was the perfect operational black hole, designed by its original engineers to resist heat transfer and sound propagation. Agent Hollis slammed his tactical tablet down on the command SUV hood, the sound sharp and frustrated. We've lost the primary cell, people. The tracking beacon went dead in Sector Delta, and the secondary perimeter reports are garbage. We can't confirm the hostage location, and we are losing daylight. This is an embarrassing operational failure. Noise saturation. The briefing room chaos was now metastasizing into field paralysis. Agent Garza, the lead scout, detailed the technological nightmare. The $200,000 thermal imaging drones were useless. The complex's enormous, residual heat signatures from decades-old, buried steam pipes and massive machinery created thermal noise saturation across the entire grid. Every single room, every hallway, every pipe looked warm on the feed, rendering the temperature differential needed to find a body null and void. The high-resolution satellite passes were equally misleading. The blueprints are outdated, Hollis, Garza reported, her voice strained. The proprietary geomapping software, costing millions, is useless. The satellite pass says open courtyard, but there are massive stacks of metal sheeting that weren't there yesterday. We are running blind on a static map that doesn't reflect the dynamic environment, and the acoustics team is picking up nothing but the wind whistling through broken windows. Hollis's rage focused on the lowest denominator, the failure of simple, human observance. Excuses. You have $1 million surveillance suite and you can't tell me where a single man is being held. Maybe you should go help the vendor sell burnt coffee. That seems more your speed. Elias continued to arrange his small cups and napkins, a rhythmic, quiet scraping sound that only seemed to increase Hollis's blood pressure. Elias wasn't just working, he was listening. He could hear the nervous clicks of their equipment, the strained whispers on their comms. Crucially, he could hear the different echo patterns coming from inside the facility, the distinct sound of a distant, intermittent pump running unevenly, a sound that was irregular and slightly louder than the background environmental hum. He paused for a moment, leaning on his cat, and looked at the complex. He shook his head slightly, almost imperceptibly, dismissing their entire high-tech approach. The arrogance of Agent Hollis was built on ignorance of history. Elias was not merely a street vendor. His quiet life was a deliberate, sophisticated camouflage for decades of deep-cover operational work. His knowledge of the steel mill was his perfect, layered cover. His true expertise was infrastructure intelligence, the art of mapping the world based on its internal sounds, scents, and subtle vibrations. Elias was recruited by the agency in the early 1990s, not for conventional combat skills, but for his uncanny ability to memorize and map environments using only sensory input. His handler, Director Thorne, then a rising field operative, recognized that while technology could map the surface, only Elias could map the invisible. The precise routes of the steam lines, the drainage patterns, the shift in air pressure, and the faint, specific hum of poorly shielded electrical conduits. His training was a brutal, non-military discipline. He spent weeks blindfolded in decommissioned municipal facilities, navigating complex sewage and water treatment plants, memoizing the distinct thump of pumps under different pressures and loads. He learned to identify the age, material, and gauge of a metal pipe by the sound of condensation dripping on it. He learned to read the heat by smelling the faint, metallic scent of ozone from overworked electrical systems, dismissing fallible thermal sensors entirely. He could estimate the flow of air through a complex duct system by the temperature differential on his damp skin. His defining mission, the one Hollis knew only as a whispering legend of the agency's past, involved dismantling an arms trafficking ring across 3 nations. The traffickers stored their components in a repurposed government building. Every external surveillance attempt failed due to deep underground shielding. Elias was deployed solely for intelligence gathering. He spent 4 days observing the building's routine. He noticed one subtle, critical anomaly. A massive volume of clean water was being trucked into the facility every week, but no wastewater trucks ever left. His conclusion: they were running a closed-loop system for something. His deduction, based on industrial knowledge, was that they were running a sophisticated machining operation requiring high-pressure coolant, which was cycled, filtered, and reused internally. This meant the core operation was hidden in the most stable, most environmentally controlled part of the building. He pinpointed a hidden sub-basement under the laundry room, an area officially designated as a utility void, by the faint, continuous vibration of a subsurface cooling fan that no one else could hear over the background city noise. His intelligence, based purely on the acoustic signature of a cooling loop, led to the successful raid, which saved hundreds of lives and dismantled a global network. He retired to the quiet life of a vendor after the physical and psychological toll of that operation, using the steel mill where he worked for 20 years as his final, most effective cover before its closure. His intimate engineering knowledge of the mill was not nostalgia. It was the ultimate defense mechanism, a perfect way to disappear into the mundane while retaining mastery over the environment. Hollis, blinded by arrogance and the escalating operational failure, stormed back to the fence, issuing the challenge. "Tell you what, since you're the expert, locate the hostage. If you tell us the correct sector, I'll pay for your entire inventory. If you're wrong, you pack up your little umbrella and get off this perimeter forever." You are requesting the fully expanded content for Section 4 of the narrative, which details the confrontation between Agent Hollis and Elias, the street vendor, and Elias's acceptance of the challenge, culminating in his precise sensor-based solution. This content, which was initially summarized by the placeholder in Part 1, is now rendered in its full, detailed, and high-tension form. Hollis, a man who believed in the omnipotence of technology and the infallibility of his rank, felt his control slipping away, replaced by simmering professional panic. The sight of the old man shaking his head at the perimeter was the final insult. Hollis stormed back to the fence, his face a mask of red fury beneath the helmet visor. "You got something to say, old man?" Hollis backed, towering over Elias. "I saw you shaking your head. You think this is easy. You think you can judge my intelligence briefing. You think you know more about this complex than $100 million worth of surveillance gear." The rest of the team stopped their frantic rerouting, grateful for the break in the high-pressure, zero-result drill. Even Agent Garza, though frustrated by Hollis's arrogance, felt a familiar embarrassment watching the professional hierarchy dissolve into street-level confrontation. "Hey, Elias," one of the technicians yelled with a sneer. "Can you even see past the fence? Or is it just a big blur? Maybe stick to the croissants, pops." Hollis, seizing the opportunity to regain authority by publicly crushing the civilian, made his decision. It was a reckless gamble born of pure desperation and overwhelming arrogance. "Tell you what, since you're the expert, and since you know so much about the wind and the sounds," Hollis sneered, gesturing dramatically toward the shadowy, metal-clad complex. "I'll offer you a test. Go ahead, locate the hostage. Tell us where they are. Be specific. If you tell us the correct sector, the correct room, I will pay for your entire inventory for the next 6 months. If you're wrong, you pack up your little umbrella, your bucket, and your cheap cat, and you get off this perimeter forever. You are a nuisance, and if you fail, you become a trespasser." Elias looked up at the young, highly decorated agent, then turned his gaze to the complex. The sheer, terrifying absurdity of the challenge was immense, a life-or-death decision resting on a guess made by a coffee vendor. But the quiet desperation in the agent's eyes, the realization of their untechnical deafness, was visible, and that was the lever. The life of the journalist, Cale, was the only thing that mattered. "I haven't been inside that complex since they closed the mill 2 years ago, sir," Elias said, his voice quiet, raspy from years of working the street corner. "I'm just here to sell coffee. Your job is tactical. My job is service." Hollis smirked, sensing the old man's surrender. "That's what I thought. All talk. Get back to." But Elias interrupted softly, his quiet voice holding a sudden, unyielding steel that silenced the entire perimeter. "If it will truly help you save a life, I'll try. But I don't need your satellites. I need silence, and I need a moment." The snickering died instantly. The sheer audacity of the old man accepting the challenge was unexpected. Elias wiped his greasy hands on his denim jacket, a final ritual, leaving dark smears. He walked slowly toward the fence, his body moving not with the athletic speed of the agents, but with a methodical slowness that the impatient agents mistakenly attributed to infirmity. He didn't look at the high-tech mapping screens displayed on the command SUV. He didn't ask for the latest drone feed. He simply looked at the fence line, then slowly scanned the complex's massive rooflines, focusing on the rusty smokestacks, the lines of condensation rising into the morning air, and the way the shadows fell across the metal cladding. "He's going to tell us to check the furnace room, the default bad guy hiding spot," Agent Garza muttered, cynical but captivated. Hollis crossed his arms, waiting for the inevitable, generalized failure, already formulating the public dismissal he would deliver. Elias leaned closer to the fence. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. He wasn't smelling the pollution. He was smelling the subtle differences in the air, the faint scent of industrial exhaust mixed with the cleaner, sharper smell of heated, recycled air coming from one distinct section. He placed his ear lightly against the rough metal of the chain link, focusing all his energy inward. He heard the pump again, that uneven, signature thump, thump thump, thump, and realized it wasn't the main waterline pump, which was silent. It was a poorly maintained, localized condensate pump. It was a sound that had been filtered out by the CIA's noise-canceling comms because it was classified as irrelevant environmental data. He opened his eyes. He pointed not toward the vast, dark central section, the logistical heart of the old mill where the hostages were always assumed to be, but to a small, insignificant protrusion on the far eastern edge of the complex, near a faded loading dock marked Dock 9 on the old plans. "The prisoner is in the old supervisor's office," Elias stated, his voice quiet but absolutely certain. "Level 2. Just above Dock 9. The roof access is the cleanest entry point. Your satellites don't see it because the building plans were intentionally misfiled by the previous owner to avoid property taxes on the renovation." The team went silent. The complex was massive, covering 10 square blocks. Elias had pinpointed a single, 10-foot by 10-foot room in a forgotten corner. He missed the main sector by 500 meters. Hollis crowed immediately, looking at his GPS grid. "That corner is dead. It's empty storage." "You're wrong, old man. Pack it up." "No, sir," Elias interrupted softly, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I told you, the blueprints are wrong. That corner was renovated into the site supervisor's private office 3 years before the mill closed. I worked here for 20 years before I started the cart. I know the complex better than your satellite. And the pump sound. That's the small auxiliary condensate pump vibrating against the thin sheet metal of the external wall. That pump only runs when the steam line to the supervisor's office bathroom is active. They are running a small electric heater off that steam line to keep one small room warm for the captive. That room has the only dedicated, localized steam supply in that entire block. It is a beacon of heat in the cold building." Hollis stared at him, rage battling with the terrifying possibility that the vendor was right. The detailed, specific knowledge of the plumbing and maintenance history, the kind of knowledge that couldn't be fabricated, was the key. He had dismissed the most valuable piece of tactical intelligence because it came from the wrong source. "Garza!" Hollis roared, abandoning the challenge and snapping back into tactical mode. "Send a scout team, silent ingress, to Sector 9. Check the supervisor's office. Confirm the location, but do not engage." The command was given. The truth was now in the hands of the field team, being tested against the impossible. Elias simply turned back to his cat, calmly pouring himself a cup of coffee, the wait for the radio confirmation the final, agonizing silence. Elias explained his reasoning to the mediator, Agent Garza, forcing Hollis to listen. That sound you hear, the thump, 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 is an obsolete auxiliary condensate pump. I installed it myself in 1998. It was designed to run only when the steam line to the supervisor's office was active. It's vibrating against the external wall because the rubber dampeners failed years ago. They are running a small, localized electric heater off that steam line to keep one small room warm for the captive. No one would notice it unless they knew the specific infrastructure history. The technical agents, humbled, pulled the 1998 maintenance records. Elias was right. The supervisor's office, marked as storage on the new geomaps, was the only room in that section with a direct, dedicated steam line. Hollis's $1 million satellite data had failed to account for a $15 faulty rubber dampener. The radio crackled with Agent Garza's confirmation, the ultimate validation of Elias's sensory intelligence. Hollis, we have visual confirmation. Level 2. Supervisor's office. 3 armed subjects and the hostage. The pump is running right beneath the floorboards. Director Thorne's sedan, which had been waiting discreetly a mile away, arrived instantly, tires spitting gravel. Green lit. Thorne's voice boomed over the secured comms, cutting through the prior confusion like a surgical knife. Garza, utilize the roof access. Hollis, you run the support. Follow the vendor's ingress point. Agent Hollis, stunned into cold, professional competence, could only issue the immediate tactical commands based on the local knowledge he had ridiculed moments before. He was stripped of his technological crutch, forced to trust the word of the man he called Umbrella Guy. Agent Garza, leading the 2-man scout team, moved with a new, terrifying clarity. Elias's intelligence had given them a roadmap far more reliable than their screens. She followed the perimeter to the faded Dock 9. The roof access point, which Hollis's team had initially dismissed as structurally unstable and irrelevant, was indeed the cleanest, most unexpected path. Garza's internal monologue was a stream of sensory validation. The air here is warmer than anywhere else. The metal smells faintly of ozone and old, cheap heating elements. Elias was right. The enemy built their security perimeter around the technological failures of the outside world, not against the quiet memory of the man who knew the pipes. The team moved in, silent and swift. They bypassed 3 large, heavily guarded entry points based on Elias's assurance that only the supervisor's office had a secondary, disused exit stairwell leading down to a maintenance corridor, a route he himself had used for smoking breaks decades ago. They breached the roof access point and descended into the warm, claustrophobic hallway leading to the target room. As they moved, Garza performed her own sensory check. She knelt down, placing her ear against the thin metal floor. The uneven thump, 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 thump of the faulty condensate pump was clearly audible beneath her, a rhythmic beacon leading them directly to Kale. They had not located the hostage with a satellite. They had located him with a malfunction that the captors themselves had ignored. The action was swift and decisive. The room was exactly as Elias described, small, well-heated, and reinforced only against frontal assault. The captors, focused entirely on the expected perimeter breaches, were caught completely by surprise. In less than 4 to 5 seconds, Kale, the journalist, was secured, extracted through the secondary exit identified by Elias, and led out through the quiet maintenance tunnels. The entire operational paralysis, which had stalled for 5 agonizing hours due to a cascade of technological failures, was resolved in under 10 minutes by a piece of intelligence derived from a $15 faulty pump dampener. The ground truth had redeemed the mission. The mission was a stunning, flawless success, leading to the immediate arrest of the 3 captors and the recovery of Kale. The official debriefing was not a celebration, but a confrontation, a full post-mortem on the systemic failure that required the intervention of a retired vendor. Agent Hollis was required to submit a full, unedited operational report detailing the precise failures of his technological command structure. Judge Shaw's counterpart in the intelligence community demanded immediate, uncompromising accountability. The report detailed the stark contrast, the $5 million equipment failure versus the free intelligence provided by Elias. The director's office mandated a final, personal confrontation for Agent Hollis. Hollis was formally reprimanded but, due to the ultimate success of the mission, was not immediately terminated. His final requirement was to submit a proposal for a new training division, addressing the agency's profound technological reliance. This report had to be personally approved by Director Thorne. Hollis, stripped of his tactical gear and forced into a cheap, uncomfortable suit, met Elias by the fence line later that day, alone. Hollis spoke first, reading from a statement he now deeply despised but knew was necessary. "Mr. Torres, I apologize for my complete and utter disrespect. I failed to recognize your essential value, prioritizing faulty data over human intelligence. My arrogance nearly cost Cale his life." Elias, stirring his coffee, listened patiently. He signed back, not a reply of acceptance, but a crucial question. "When you looked at the screen, what did you feel? And when you heard the pump sound, what did you realize?" Hollis answered honestly, his voice strained with the weight of his failure. "The screen made me feel powerful, but blind. It made me deaf to everything real. The pump sound made me realize I had been deaf to the world right outside my own operational perimeter. I realized I was focusing on the weapon, not the environment." Elias chuckled softly. "You must learn to read the silence, Agent. The biggest threats hide in the infrastructure you ignore." Hollis presented his final report to Director Thorne. He proposed the establishment of a new training division, focusing entirely on ground intelligence and sensory mapping. He named it the Torres Sensory Intelligence Protocol. Every new agent would be required to spend 2 weeks training with Zero technology, learning to navigate and map urban infrastructure using only sound, scent, and memory. The director approved the protocol and summoned Elias for a final, formal meeting. The resolution was not just a successful mission, it was the reformation of an intelligence doctrine. The agency, which had become too reliant on satellite uplinks and algorithmic prediction, was forced to rediscover the most ancient and reliable source of intelligence, the human mind connected to the physical world. The agency compensated Elias handsomely for his inventory and his time. But the true compensation was the mentorship. Hollis approached Elias one final time, offering an extended hand. "Mr. Torres, I need your expertise. The director has mandated that I learn from you. I need you to teach my new recruits how to be deaf to the data and listen to the ground." Elias, accepting the mentorship role, smiled, a deep, knowing smile that crinkled the edges of his eyes. "I'll teach them, Agent. But first, you must learn where to buy the best coffee in the city, and you must learn the names of every person who cleans the offices. The mission starts on the street, not in the clouds." He shook Hollis's hand, the man who was background noise now the absolute master of the operational zone. The quiet surveyor had returned to service, proving that the deepest well of intelligence often lies in the hands of the person the system is designed to overlook. The agency kept a note card on the official debriefing desk, written in Director Thorne's hand. It said, "Ground truth is not in the satellites. It is in the sound of the pump." And on the wall of the new Sensory Intelligence Training Annex, a dedication was mounted, visible to every recruit. The Elias Torres Protocol. Trust the senses, not the sensor.